Hello and welcome to Cindershadow Gaming. I'm your host Cindershadow, and today we're going to talk about the Magic the Gathering Shuffler. Well, there's been a lot of discussion through the birth of Magic the Gathering Arena and things we see wrong with how things seem to be shuffling and everything else that goes on with the game. Now, I'm here to tell you that there has been a lot of things that have come out to light. A lot of people say they're conspiracies. There's a lot of people that say there's certain things wrong with it. There's this, there's that. And if you compare it to paper, it's going to be completely different. And that is correct. Paper Magic is completely different than the Magic the Gathering Shuffler in Arena and also in Magic the Gathering Online shuffling. Now, with Magic the Gathering Online, they did do a large update many years ago that have seemed to squish this sort of bug, but not really a bug. It's designed in such a way not to tax the system, and there's limitations to the programming of Magic the Gathering Arena in particular, where with the MTGO, the changes, they did an infrastructure change, and then it was able to move forward properly with the shuffling the way it is. Now, we're going to start this with a post from Chris Clay on the Reddit subreddit for Magic the Gathering Arena. We'll go through that because there's a lot of information there that he does give towards the shuffling and how things that they're trying to change it. Now, the post is from a year ago, but things still are very relevant with it. So about a year ago, Chris Clay put a post on the Magic subreddit. He's talking about people to play nice and everything, and players reporting true variance in the shuffler doesn't feel correct as they aren't wrong. This is more than just a math problem. Overcoming all our inherent biases around how variance should work is incredibly difficult. However, they feel saying something's wrong, all the math has supported everything is correct. Now, when you do the true probabilities when you have a 60 card Magic deck, the probabilities say one thing, but MTG Arena will say a different thing, mainly because in here he talks about snipping off both ends of the bell curve. The shuffler and coin flips are treated equally. There is no system in place to adjust either per player. That's correct. The only system in place right now to stray from a single randomized shuffler is in the best of one opening hand system, but there is a choice between two fully randomized decks. This is correct, but at the same time it's incorrect, this statement. The fully randomized decks, in this case, we're going to call them a seed. When you boot up a game of Arena, it takes your system clock or the system server's system clock, and then it creates a seed based off your deck list and Unity being the random number generator that will produce the seed. And what a seed is they take every card that's in your deck and they lay it out in a list. That list is then presented to you as your deck. Much like the same if I was to turn around and shuffle a deck of cards and put it down in front of you, there would be a sequence that you would be able to follow with it. And that, once again, is your deck. Now, with seeds, we're going to go into that in a little bit. I'm going to finish this first because that's where the most important thing is with the shuffling and how Magic the Gathering Arena is very different from paper Magic. The only system in place, we already read that. When we do shuffle, we shuffle the full deck. The card you draw is already known on the back end. It is not generated at the time you draw, and this is where we're talking about the seeds. Digital shufflers have long solved problem. We're not breaking new ground here. If If your paper experience differs significantly from the digital, the most logical conclusion is you're not shuffling correctly. That is incorrect. There is a lot here. There's a lot with the shuffler, from learning how it shuffles, from learning the coding language, and most recently the changes they've actually done to MTG Arena, moving it away from a 32-bit client to a 64-bit client, should have made differences, but we know that's not quite true. You need at least 7 ruffle shuffles to get a randomization in paper. This is a long-known thing. If you shuffle 7 times ruffling, that's taking 2 stacks and actually ruffling 7 times, not just sliding them together, not putting them down in stack piles, not anything like that. Stack piling can be done as there's a way to cheat with stack piling called the double nickel. You take all your lands and then your cards, and you literally shuffle them in 5 stacks, 1 per stack, because 5 goes into 60 easily. You do it twice and it actually gives you a perfect land to card draw ratio, and that's called the double nickel. That is something to be aware of when it comes to paper shuffling, and why sometimes you may see your opponents get the upper edge if you're not quite aware of that. Now, the whole purpose is to have a randomized deck, but it's not truly randomized. We go into a pseudo randomization of the cards, and that is where the seed is created, and because it is a pseudo randomization, they are actually using an algorithm. The algorithm in turn is called the Fisher-Yates algorithm, and it's been a long known thing, that the algorithm that has been known to be used in deck shuffling and many other games like this. This was written back in the open beta. They had billions of shufflers, over hundreds of millions of games. There are massive data sets which show us everything is working correctly. Even so, there are going to be some people who have landed on the far ends of the bell curve of probability. This is why we have people lose a coin flip 26 times in a row, and we've had people win 26 times in a row. That's the far end of these bell curves. It's why we have drawn many creatures in a row, or many lands in a row. When you look at the math size and the players and the size of players taking issue with the shuffler is actually far smaller than one would expect. Each player is sharing their own experience, and they're an outlier liner. I'm not surprised they think the system is rigged. Now, part of that is because of the limiting of the system. It's not so much that the system is rigged, it is working as intended. But there's a big but on that, because there is only so many randomization seeds the system can actually draw from. They're looking at possible ways to snip the ends of the bell curve while still maintaining the sanctity of the game, yada yada yada. So that's Chris Clay's take on the shuffler. Back in 2018, there was a tracker publication that came out saying debunking the evil shuffler. There's a lot really here. Like, they come up with the statistical stuff for how lands are curved over time. This is true. This is all 100% legit. This is the way things work in paper. Mainly in paper, because you're getting a sense of true randomization of cards. When it comes to MTG Arena, though, they're trying to snip off either ends of the bell curve, so you don't get this land distribution the same way. They're trying to take off the absolute worst and the absolute best of this scenario, and just give you what's in the middle. So when you have the minus 20% to the plus 20 and the 15 and the 20, that's pretty much getting snipped off, and they're only using the middle. And that is done with the Fisher-Yates algorithm, and because they have to cheat the system with the size of the program is mainly what it is. These big programs or these random number generations, there's certain ways you can do this, and because we're integrating Unity into this, you still have to go through a pseudo randomization of a number. Ultimately, they said that this is busted. This is not any true, and unfortunately, I have to say that's not entirely the way things are, especially going back to Chris Clay's comments saying we're trying to do this, we're trying to make it as much as possible as a pseudo randomization, and that's where this got it wrong. That there's nothing wrong with the way that they've presented this, it's just we know that there are certain things being manipulated in Magic the Gathering Arena, and it's something that has to be fully flushed out, and if you're not aware of it, you're going to get a true sense of things are rigged against you. Now, there was someone else, another Reddit post that came out about a year ago once again, and they've done an update, and apparently there's going to be another update soon enough on this, where they calculated out in real time and collected the data for 1 million games of Magic the Gathering Arena, showing the shuffler and how things are gathered. It is a lengthy thing to go over. I think even Desolator Magic talked about this, and ultimately they came down, yeah, things are rigged in one way or another. Now, once you understand a little bit more behind that with the programming side and the limitations of the program, then it all starts to make a little bit more sense. There's also, I'm going to keep these sort of posts going. There's also a post on the official bug reports for Wizards of the Coast that is going on. It's got over 1,000 upvotes on it, talking about the shuffler algorithm. And it says, please do away with shuffler algorithms, just randomize it. I feel I need to build a deck that suits the algorithms, which I don't want to do. Mainly, if you understand the algorithm, you can actually build a deck that will exploit that. And he's not right saying get rid of the algorithm, but you can't do it. Magic the Gathering Arena, once again, is limited to the size of the program. 32-bit or 64-bit, it is still very limited to the size of the program, and you will still have to deal with the shuffling algorithm in digital paper. And this is why physical paper is much more superior than the digital version. Now, we've talked about how the programming and seeds and all this other stuff. I'll break it down in a minute, but Channel Fireball actually put up a introduction to hypergeometric distribution for Magic players. This is what's going to give you the proper probabilities in paper and not digital once again. When you have a 60 card deck, there is a certain probability for you to draw a card. Much like if you're playing the lotto, there's a certain probability that your numbers will come up. In a 649, where you have 6 numbers out of 49, I believe it's 1 in, I want to say 14 million, and in 7 it's 1 in 26 million. I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but there's you have a better chance of actually being struck by lightning. And that is the same thing in Magic the Gathering in general. To get your perfect hand every time, you have to have the probabilities have to be cut down. And this is where if you have 4 of a copy in a deck, your probabilities go from a 1 in 60 to a much lesser value. Okay, so first we got to look at a deck of cards in Arena and why things are so much different from this compared to paper. I've brought up here a simple deck. This is based off the Rogues, the black-blue mill Rogues deck that's out there right now. And I've turned around and done 4 of every card. Now, this creates from a 1 in 60 actually to a 1 in 15, because there's only 15 different cards here. You still build a 60 card deck, so then it shuffles it down. What I have here beside me is from my output logs. I believe this is the actual deck in it, but I may not be correct. Now I'm actually really looking at it. I'm seeing this 7-132. 6 times, which was the original deck because I had 6 swamps in it originally. What this shows you is how every card correlates to a number, and that number then is taken into Unity, which is the random number generator. And that's where these numbers are randomly shuffled and created. And this is where you get what's called a seed. And then so it takes these numbers, throws them in this calculation that is done in split seconds with your computer's power, and that is your deck. That becomes your stack of the deck. Now, when you shuffle things like, say, Fable Passage, this is where I'm unclear on how things do change in the deck. There's certain other nuances that I have noticed with the game, and a lot of times where I'm searching for a card and then I reshuffle the deck, it happens to put the same types of cards on top of the deck, and I don't know how relevant that is, and that could just be the Unity engine picking similar numbers, and that's things that have gone wrong with Unity in the past, with hope that it's changed now. So instead of a 1 in 60, we have a 1 in 15 chance to draw a certain card when you bring it down quite a bit, and that's a huge difference in the game. What is the difference between 1 in 60 and 1 in 15? Now, a 1 in 15 chance is about 6.67% chance to draw any given card on, say, the top of your deck. I'm not going to bring in drawing the first 7 cards because we know that's going to be how things really do work, but in this case it's not really relevant to what we're looking at. When you bring it down to a 1 in 60 from the 1 in 15, it actually becomes a 1.67 chance to draw a single card. Now, these are all nuances. It's numbers that don't really mean a lot to us because these probabilities are true probabilities and what you would get in a paper game, but we don't actually get those in Arena. Now, with shuffling algorithms and Arena, and even in poker in some games, you're seeing what's called the Fisher-Yates shuffle. It's an algorithm for generating a random permutation in a finite sequence. In plain terms, the algorithm shuffles the sequence. That sequence then becomes a seed based off the clocks and however things are calculated within your computer model and the servers. It takes the number and it creates this algorithm, and then it just spits out a seed and spits out the sequence of numbers that was created, and thus why it's a pseudo randomization. Now, every time you draw a card, it eliminates one off the results, and it continues. They do have a range here of like 1 to 6. You roll a 5, and it takes off certain results when things continue. There's a lot here to really unpack, but this so far is not anything too crazy. It gets a little bit more difficult when you're trying to explain that there is so many different random seeds that can be generated with a 60 card deck that this Fisher-Yates shuffle technically makes it far worse to be using this if you want a true randomization. But once again, we have to go back to a true randomization with the limitation of the size of the program. Now, everything we've spoken up to this point, probabilities and the way the shuffler works, is kind of nuanced when it really comes down to it. The reason why they've chosen to use a pseudo-random algorithm is because of the size of the number that's actually out there. In a regular 52 card deck, there's a lot more math that's available out there when it comes to a 52 card deck. I can sit there and do a 60 card deck, but the numbers are so much more astronomical. A 52 card deck works just fine. When you have a 52 card deck, the number of possibilities in a 52 card deck is 8.06 to the 67th exponent. That is a giant number. To give you an idea of that number, like that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 commas, 7 commas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 commas between the 3 digits in the number, actually coming out to the quintillionth times. And because of that number being so large is why they have to use the pseudo randomization.
Okay, guys, we have officially got to 2.08 billion life, and according to my calculations, just kidding, according to Wikipedia, for a signed 32-bit integer, the highest number that you should be able to get to is 2.147 billion and then some other numbers. So activating his ability right now should do it. It should put me over, and then I believe for an unsigned, all it does is double it, I think. I don't remember. Hopefully.
We'll find out.
I should just click on the damn article.
Oh, why is it in the red? It went negative.
It did it. It rolled over the memory location.
So when you're looking at a 32-bit integer, which the video that actually I did with Desolator there and rolling over the life total confirmed that they're using 32-bit in there, that's where you get this big integer. That's this 2,147,483,647. You times that by 2, and that is from A to B how many possibilities that they can use for a seed. So that actually comes out to 4,294,967,295, or 2 to 32nd minus 1. That's a big number. That's a pretty big number. But when you compare it to the amount of a, like, even a 52 card deck, how many different possible computing outcomes there are, it's nowhere close to. This is where it's come down to understanding more about pseudo-randomization of numbers, why they have to use the Fisher-Yates algorithm overall. It's just such a big number. The programming of the system can't understand it. It just goes beyond the capability of the programming. So when you have something in the 50 quadrillion possibilities and you're limited by a number in 4 billion, that makes it a lot more unlikely to see. We can bring that down once again when we add 4 of each card to a deck, but you're not going to see that. And I think this is why if you play Brawl or Commander online, you see a much bigger variance of these cards. You don't see them clumping as so much that you do see the randomization truly come out. These are probably part of the flaws when it comes down to playing Magic the Gathering, but ultimately they're doing what they can to try and fix them. They're doing what they can to make it seem random enough that it won't ultimately be a problem. This is also the problem when you have to use one program, an algorithm, and then another program to come up with all the randomizations. So what is the outcome of all of this? They've got to cheat and chop off some of that bell curve. They've really got to shrink it down so you're not dealing with nearly as many randomizations. And there are still some unanswered questions that I just don't know. Like, if you are to reshuffle your deck in some point, is a new seed generated, or do they continue with the exact same seed and it just picks a new spot in that seed? And that is something that is very interesting, because once you get into a game, it's harder to generate that new seed without leaving the game and coming back into it. So ultimately, there's still unanswered questions when it comes down to the Magic the Gathering Arena Shuffler. But when it does come to that, yes, there is a certain level that really does seem rigged with the system, and it really does come down to it. But it is all in a limitation of the programming aspect and why it's nowhere near what paper is going to be. You can give me all the probabilities in the world on when to draw a certain card, and this is why I didn't go that far into showing the probabilities, because they're not true and definite when it comes down to this computer programming. It's just such a large number that the computer program really is limited by the size of the programming that it's been built on. Now, you can turn around and go, well, recently they got rid of the 32-bit client, but we still know that they are using the 32-bit client mainly because of the video that I shot with Desolator. Now, that was quite some time ago, so it would be interesting to maybe revisit that to see if those numbers do change, but I suspect that they won't. As a 32-bit client is a lot more stable than a 64-bit client, and you would see a lot more problems that we do see when every new set comes out. So know this, that it is all the way it is. It is designed the way it is only out of a necessity for us to want to play our game and enjoy our game. If they didn't do this, we would have things that wouldn't even run. We wouldn't be able to play Magic the Gathering Arena, and it would just completely break the system. Now, there is hopes with MTGO, when they did do that one update with it and changing it over, that they created a much larger infrastructure. They may have went from a 64-bit client to a 128-bit client, which is much more close to where you need to be for these large integers or prime numbers to actually make much more sense when it comes to the mathematical side of things, and why you're able to do a lot more with the program. And it really does seem things are fleshed out a lot better. But they are still, from my understanding, using a pseudo randomization, except they've tweaked it enough that it doesn't feel that way anymore. Well, this has been one of those videos that's kind of difficult to go over because there's a lot of math involved, and if I was to do the math, all of the math behind it, this video would probably be about 2 hours long, and that's why I've kind of skipped over a lot of the math and just that. And the math doesn't really matter when it comes to the probability, because they're using a pseudo randomization and because they can only have so many allotted seeds when it comes to Magic the Gathering Arena. You can only generate so many seeds before the program just completely breaks. And this is why we see what appears to be kind of rigging, but it's not really. It's on purpose, and it has to be on purpose for us to have a game to run the way it's going to run. With the game going to mobile, this is also something that's going to have to happen, and they're going to have to keep this very, very the way it is. So unfortunately, it is what it is, and the way the game goes will have to continue to go that way, and there's not much more we can do about it unless they scrap the entire thing and start over from scratch on a much bigger version of the game, or try and thread in so many of these different 32-bit clients, but then it's just not feasible, or not. There's just a certain level that you can get to, and it just doesn't work. The algorithms they've got to use here, we're stuck with it if we want to have a game of any sense, just to be able to play it on a regular basis. And when it does come down to it, everyone has their own. It's not rigged one way or another. I have heard other theories that there is certain accounts that are rigged due to much the same like a booster pack opening is with the mythic and rare slots. I don't know how much credence I give to that yet. I haven't seen much behind that, and that's something for another video to try and maybe hamper out and test with it. Anyway, guys, I hope you liked this a little bit more in-depth video into the shuffling algorithm and the way MTG Arena is working with the shuffling. It's been a fairly lengthy discussion in a sense. There's lots to show, there's lots of info already out there, and I've just tried to piece it together the best I can where it makes the most sense in this case. If I was to try and really hash this right out, like I said, it would probably take 2 to 3 hours to properly show all the statistics and all the probabilities, why it comes down to it when all the info is already out there online, just trying to put it all into one place. If you like these kinds of videos, let me know down below. Let me know your thoughts. Did I get something wrong here? Do you think that there's something more behind this? Is there something that I truly have missed? Because there is a lot of information here that is also questionable. Like, we just don't know what happens when the deck gets shuffled, if it's picking a new spot in the sequence or if it actually does jumble up that sequence. Anyway, guys, don't forget to subscribe, like or dislike the video down below. I will catch you guys next time.